But so that's like if you go on vacation, you bring like basically a capsule wardrobe.
True.
I feel like it goes back to that definition, like I was saying, like what brings you value or joy,
Right,
basically.
right.
So if your idea of like a minimalist wardrobe is like pinks and like reds and things of
Right.
that sort, go with
Or
it.
even patterns,
Yes,
right?
patterns.
So
The Intentional Wardrobe Movement, TIWM, stands for
T, take back your style.
I intentionally shop.
W, wear it, work it, or wave goodbye.
And M, matter.
And you can check out more details in our description. Hi, I'm Brandy.
Hi, I'm Sam.
And in this episode of the Intentional Wardrobe Movement, we'll be discussing minimalism, helpful or restrictive. Simple enough, right? But we're going to really delve into the nuts and bolts of the whole concept of minimalism in fashion. We're going to really see, how do you define it? Is minimalism sustainable? How do you personally feel about minimalism in your fashion? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it have a privilege problem? Is it cold and frumpy? Does it age you? And then ultimately, how do you personally practice minimalism through your style? All right, let's get
dive
talking.
in.
Yeah. So, Sam, how do you define minimalism?
Okay, well, so whenever I initially thought of minimalism, I kind of think of kind of stark, cold, things like that. But when I did some research, I really like this definition from Anthony Ongaro. And basically, it's minimalism is all about only owning what adds value and meaning to your life, as well as to the lives of the people you care about, and removing the rest. And I like that definition. It's like just really what matters. Basically, what matters. Minimalism is what matters.
Yeah. So for me, I really look at it in a way that it's a belief in simplicity, and that simplicity overrules excess, and that act of accepting that within yourself, it sort of gives you space, it gives you freedom to find peace and happiness, right? So especially having worked with folks at the Real, did a lot of closet clean outs, and I saw so much happiness in the act of letting go. And so I actually took a cue from Sukrit Chopra, who wrote that minimalism as a movement really started with transcendentalism. So if you think about, I'm bringing it back.
There.
We're going there. I'm bringing it back to transcendentalism, partly because in high school I was in academic decathlon, and we studied Thoreau, and we studied this whole school of thought. It just like Emerson. I mean, think about the 1850s, where they were at, but they were ultimately pushing this insight of say goodbye to excess. Let's really find solitude. And then within that, we'll be able to grow more. And then, you think about, okay, how did minimalism impact architecture? Well, Bauhaus, right? Like in the early 1900s, think about Germany. We started having this from this incredibly esoteric thought process of transcendentalism to, okay, Bauhaus is a visual representation of simplicity, right? So, beauty could also mean utility. And so this concept of utilitarianism, I think, also moved minimalism. And then really, I have to throw out the 60s, because I think for any good movement to really gain traction, you have to have a rebellious vibe behind you. And I think that's, for me, where minimalism was turning things on its head. And I think that's sort of where fashion came into the notion of war and peace. And we were looking for peace in many ways. We were looking at it on the outside as well as on the inside. Yeah. And so you could see Yves Saint Laurent, Pierre Cardin, they came out with these very simplified.
Oh yeah, the silhouettes.
Yes. And what's interesting to me is, who doesn't have Yves Saint Laurent currently in their closet, right? Pierre Cardin, okay, maybe didn't maybe we don't all have that, but really, the thought process of being freed by simplicity. And then for me personally, minimalism, and this is where we talk about, how do you personally feel about, and Sam came up with the idea of like, what does minimalism really make you feel? I think for us, we were raised in the 80s and the 90s. And I have to look back to like Calvin Klein and Jill Sander and Donna Karan.
Those are good. I love them.
They're good, right? But see, this was our time.
This was
this
our
is
time.
what minimalism, and it makes me feel like growing up. It makes me feel like maturing. And so I really, because we had this whole concept of simplicity, and I still really practice a lot of it in my day to day.
Like as in style, or just
as
in like
style in general, because I pretty, when I was wedding dress shopping, I remember my mother was like, "Oh, you like them so plain," and I do. I'm just plain, everyone. I believe in the aesthetics of minimalism, and I don't know if it's just because it's something that it's like home cooked meals. It's like, isn't there something that just brings you back to those moments of being young? And it's funny because is it frumpy? That's the real question here.
So, okay, I've never thought of minimalism as frumpy. I guess I just think of like, when I think of minimalism, I think of like stark and like super uber modern. And so that's why I think of it as being cold. But when you mentioned like Donna Karan and Calvin Klein, that's like my jam. Like that's like that is like totally my jam. And it's so funny because I recently took this style quiz, and it said one of my words was minimalism, and I'm like, no way. So I took it again, and it said it again, and I was like, maybe I am kind of minimalist, because I think of myself as a maximalist. So basically, I love simple things. I think like one of the concepts I teach in my program is like simplify to amplify. So I love your like minimalism is simplicity, which is like makes everything so much easier, and you saw a lot of joy with that. I feel like I love certain things, like certain silhouettes that are very simple, and I love like beautiful architecture. So I love simplicity and minimalism in that way. But I guess I like to add a lot of accessories. So I guess for that reason, I feel like I'm not a minimalist. And when I think of minimalism, I think it's like 5 shirts and 5 pants and 5 earrings, and that's it. And so that makes me sad.
Yeah, and maybe the reality is that theory versus reality, folks.
Right.
Maybe the reality is that there's a little bit of an identity crisis going on with minimalism, because I think it's a pretty broad topic. And even when you and I were talking about, what should we first open up with? And I really thought, wow, when I sat down to put down on paper, what do I really think about minimalism? It's a hard thing because life happens, right? Like you have to have things to function. If you have a client-facing job, you have to have items that represent you in a suitable way. If you have a child that plays soccer, you have to have items that you can traipse through wet mud to go sit outside in the 100-degree sun. If you play tennis or golf, you need clothing that's appropriate to hold a ball or, cover your shoulders. So if you're a mom with a young child, you can't wear big dangly earrings.
No, you really can't.
You
can, unless they're easy to pull off.
Yeah, they really will pull on those. But you may want to wear those when you go on date night. So the practical application of minimalism, I think of it as an aesthetic, really more than as
like a practice.
Yeah. I mean, I think that my style would be, maybe it's just my experience of working in, 90s Wall Street, where we used to wear suits, y'all.
I love suits though.
Suits, pantsuit was casual Friday as a woman. I wear skirt suits Monday through Thursday. But I think that, to me, it's just sort of more of an aesthetic, can't say that word today, versus how much you have, right? Which
Oh,
is,
okay, that's
and
very
I think
different.
that's a
Yeah.
difference in terms of, quantity versus, it's always quality, y'all, because we're sustainable.
Right.
And then, well, that actually brings me to my next question. Do you think that minimalism, because in your mind, minimalism also associates a number of values. So,
Yeah.
so is that what you feel brings minimalism to the foreground as being something that's truly sustainable, or?
I mean, I feel like if you are practicing minimalism as in like a practice with numbers, not as an aesthetic, then to me that is sustainable because you're using these pieces over and over and over. But there's that concept to where I can't remember the name of the concept, but basically you grow to the size of your container. So like a plant will grow to the size of its pot, and in
Mm-hmm.
order to have a bigger root system, you have to replant it.
That's
So if
true.
you have like a large house, it's likely you have a lot of things that are filling that house. Now, I do have some
It's
friends
true.
that I am so amazed by them. Basically, they started brand new, they built a new house. It's a very modern house, and they have very minimal things in it. They got rid of all of their kids' toys. They gave them a budget. They could buy what they wanted. I mean, I aspire to be like that because to me,
Yeah.
that is simplicity at its finest. Like they are happy, like they're living their lives, they enjoy experiences. Like that's what I would love to do.
Yeah.
So to
I don't know if okay. So
me,
I want to go back to, I'll comment on both of the things that you said because I think they were important. The reality of space. And I'm going to point to the 532 square feet that I lived in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. The size of my closet dictated my minimalism. I mean, it really did, right? Like the reality was that I
yeah.
just didn't have the space to pack all the things that I currently have now that I live in the state of
But
Texas.
that's like if you go on vacation, you bring like basically a capsule
It's
wardrobe,
true. You
and
do.
which we will
That
talk about
which we
later.
will discuss the whole 5 4 3 2 1. It's true. And I have this approach too, because it's one of the things that I offer when I'm doing the personal styling, personal shopping for folks. I say that travel packing and my travel packing service, it is the true minimalism capsule wardrobe because you genuinely have a finite amount of space.
Yes.
Working for the Real here, I worked in Texas and we have an enormous amount of space. And you're right. I mean, you just have a lot of space. And what happens is it's really hard to be disciplined enough not to fill that space.
It is.
And I love that you said that you have a friend who moved to a new house and did not bring their children's toys. I
They didn't bring
remember
any of their stuff.
I don't know. I'm building a house currently and I'm going to aspire to this. I'll let you know if that actually happens when we do get down that road. Gosh, the toy thing. I remember, I think my oldest was in first grade, went over to a couple's house. And I was like, wow, your first floor of your home is just so clean and minimal. And she said, yes, we have a no toy downstairs policy. And I thought, I absolutely don't have that policy. I mean, really and truly just bins and bins of things, right? Now, as my children have aged, I've been able to let it go, but it really does, is minimalism something that, if it's truly sustainable, you should be practicing it in all forms of your life, not just in fashion. And that's sort of how, we look at the thought process of living alone off the grid in a cabin and transcendentalism and, your architecture should be, it's funny that you said you thought of it as very stark because, maybe that white Miami 1980s box architecture is truly what we should be going for, like turn your back on ornate. I think minimalism can be implemented in a way that isn't necessarily boring. Yes, we think neutrals, but part of that is because we're trying to uphold less is more. So when you go online and you're looking for a minimalist wardrobe, it always comes up as like black and white and gray and beige. But it doesn't have to be, right? Like, sure, Calvin Klein and Donna Karan. I did cite some Jill Sander. Like, I cited some folks that are just like really, really plain and form. But it could be a tight-fitting red sequined miniskirt.
Yeah.
Like, so I think in terms of how you can practice minimalism, you're supposed to be finding freedom. And if freedom for you is that like micro mini, because I don't, I want to, maybe I do implement it a little bit more conservatively because of my background and just where I was and what I did when I was in my 20s. And so maybe a pantsuit is my idea of excitement. But I think that you could absolutely be 25 and say, I'm going to pare down what my wardrobe consists of. And you could do a lot of great things with that micro mini red sequin skirt.
Because I feel like it goes back to that definition, like I was saying, like what brings you value or joy, basically. Right. So if your idea of like a minimalist wardrobe is like pinks and like reds and things of that sort, go with it.
Or even patterns, right? Patterns. So you can still ascribe to maybe minimalist in aesthetic in terms of cut or form. Maybe it's more of a tent dress, or maybe you really, ideally, you could combine the two, deal with a nice clean aesthetic, as well as layer in the fact that we need to be a little bit conscious of overconsumption.
Yeah.
And, minimalism is a broad topic. It's a broad definition, but it still provides you a boundary.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point you brought up, because I think it was probably, I don't know if it was born because of like the pendulum swung the other way because of all of this ornateness and so much.
Like the Renaissance. Oh yeah, I went there. I'm going into the Renaissance, y'all. No, but
so
it's
like,
it's
true.
It
just
like
went
the
other way,
right? And yeah, it is. There is, and that was ultimately why I had to talk about the 60s and the contrarianism. I think there's the grass is always greener, right?
Yeah.
But really, we were sort of being suffocated, and women in general. Let's talk about fashion just the way that it used to be. Oh my gosh. Crinoline and hoop skirts and
oh my gosh, you could barely
corsets, y'all, corsets.
But they're back in.
I know, but in a much more freeing, body bearing way. It's true, they are back in, but it's, I think maybe we just needed to take time to step back from all of that.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And what you brought up is really interesting about minimalism, just because I feel like the way I've thought about it is in like your personal possessions. But if you think of it as like, I'm trying to practice like being very intentional with what I buy, being very sustainable about, what I'm like wearing, what I have over and over, things like that. That is a better way to approach it.
And it teaches patience.
Patience. Oh my gosh.
Which is huge.
Huge. Especially now.
Oh, especially now. Oh, Sam, don't get me started on that. We are raising children in today's age.
They
do not understand. It's. I had to sit through commercials, and I had to wait for a week to see my episode of Friends. Yeah,
right. And like, if you order something, it won't be here tomorrow morning.
Oh, yes, like the Amazon warehouse that is 2 feet from our home. Yeah, my kids are like, "Is it here? Is it?" I'm like, "It's only been 2 hours since Mommy pressed that buy button." This really does give us a lot to work with, I think, in terms of not being overly rigid. And I do like that it's somewhat broad because, rigidity is very difficult to practice, but it does give us a boundary, which is identifiable, right? Like, you know what? Clean, simple, aesthetic, less is more. All of these things, there's just really in line with sustainability, and also supporting brands that are moving in this direction. Oh my gosh, the Shein model. I watched Brandy Hellville, the documentary the other day, and they said that Shein comes out with 1,000 new style lines a week. Oh, wow. So, when you're supporting brands that are maybe making made to order, or they are producing, even in this day and age, seasonally, would be a dream if they're only producing 4 times a year. these are all steps toward the right direction. Because ultimately, we do see this huge divide in terms of how do we implement the things that we want. And I do think that minimalism across the board, not just in fashion, could give us a, you know, a good dose of healthy ideas.
Yeah, I think it's great for ideas. I do think, you know, you were talking about rigidity, and I do think that some people work really well with rigidity. Like they have to practice something, and if they break from it, then they kind of like, oh, I've broken, you know, I've messed up and I'm done. But so some people work really well with rigidity. This for like if you're thinking about specific numbers, for me, it's very hard.
It is. It is. That's why I sort of like, and we will talk more. And I think that's where like the whole concept of capsule creation,
Mhm.
which is this sort of mini trend within the movement of minimalism, that's where it starts to get, for me personally, a little bit harder.
Okay.
Because that's where really, that's where numbers are important. And
No, but I feel, oh
we'll
yeah, we're gonna
get
talk
there.
about
We'll
it
get there. But
more.
I do think I think it's a good ideal. It's a good thing to move toward in the end. I think ultimately too, because you know this is important to me. Minimalism teaches fiscal responsibility,
Yes.
and a lot has been said lately about. I was in the gym the other day, y'all, and whatever news station was on, and they were talking about some numbers for Gen Z, and they were saying Gen Z non-mortgage debt, 97% of them. Now, I don't know where college education falls in, because obviously it's triple, quadrupled what we paid when we went to school. But so I'm sure some of that 97% of Gen Z in debt, non-mortgage debt, is college. But they said on average, they have over $16,500 of debt. And so, you know, minimalism may be a good thing for you to practice on your day to day, because having a boundary for fiscal spending too, you know, that'll help you rein it in a little bit. But it, you know, in general, just it's against fast fashion. So I think it ticks
Totally.
all the boxes of
Yes.
sustainability for us. So tell me, you know, how do you put this into practice in your day to day?
I guess I don't, I mean, I'm not rigidly practicing this, but I mean, I guess like there's been studies. In fact, what is this? Oh, yeah. A study by Princeton showed that physical clutter negatively affects your focus, your ability to focus and process information. So, as far as that goes, I've been practicing minimalism by trying to like actually clear out our spaces in my closet and as well as the rest of the house. I'm really honestly with what's going on with the children and everything, I'm getting overwhelmed. Like it's very easy for me to get overwhelmed. So I'm trying to create like more white space in my closet and in the house. Like that's how I'm practicing it. Like
Create peace. I'm telling you.
yes. So
Maybe
I'm
you don't live off the grid,
yes.
but you do. You
So
are trying to find ways to create
right.
some physical representation of space
Right. So some
in
white
mind and
space.
body.
Right.
And
So some clarity. So less clutter. So you have some mental clarity. And so, of course, like if it's clothing or whatever, I'm either giving it to friends or putting it in a circular economy like with ThreadUp or something like that, Poshmark, whatever. So things like that. That's how personally I'm practicing it lately. What about you?
well, you know, for me, I think I practice it as an aesthetic just in general. I do like clean lines. I like suits. I do like, oh gosh, I just like a lot of, I mean, I wear black and navy pretty much like every day. Adding color for me is hard. Maybe with a pop of color for a bag. That's my thing. I do like handbags, y'all. But no, in terms of my everyday practice, so obviously the aesthetic, I worked in the resale market. So, you know, I do try and make sure that the things that I am buying, I do truly love.
Yes.
It taught me a lot for 4 years of being within this recirculated economy. It taught me just a tremendous amount about my impact in the earth, water, how to stay away from those things. And I also, you know, that sort of brings me to, gosh, you know, do you think that minimalism has a privilege problem? Like, are we putting too much on people to say, buy, super quality handmade things in France that cost, which we all see, they've upped 50% in retail in the last, 2 years. But it's not size inclusive. Like there's a lot of things that people say against the minimalist movement. But I really hold true to resale. It democratizes fashion, but it also does good things for people and planet. So for me, how I stay within my lines of the boundaries, the rigidity, I really try to make sure that I am conscious. I got to tell you, I just do one in, one out, but I had some folks who I worked with at the Row who did 1 in, 7 out.
Oh,
so
wow.
My goal ultimately would be to move in that direction. And I think in terms of having the minimalist lifestyle and aesthetic, again, still can't say that word, like that would be my goal.
Yeah.
So my client, you know who you are? No, no, really and truly, it was inspirational because, and I think I didn't meet this client until maybe year 3 of working the Row. And when I did, I thought, whoa, my mind is blown. Like, I really do have a much higher bar to set for myself. And so I'm practicing that. I am actively doing 1 in, 1 out, but I'm goaling myself to be more minimal.
So that's the thing. So are you trying to get to a certain number? Because so honestly,
numbers are scary.
The most sustainable thing is to wear what we already have, right?
Yes.
So
and
technically,
shop your closet.
Right, shop your closet.
This is what I espouse, technically. But this is the reason why I am hired by folks to help them along this sustainable journey, right? Like, there's a reason why when I go to the gym, I need to go to a cycle bar class. Because I need someone, Glenn, my cycle bar instructor, I need you to lead me through my health journey. I hire someone, a professional, to help me train. This is why people have to hire professionals to help them along this journey, the sustainable journey of actually being able to implement minimalism. Because yes, it is the most sustainable thing to never buy a new thing again. And I did listen to a podcast, and I don't remember which one it was. I'm sorry. But they had said, she hadn't bought a new item in 13 years. And I was wow, that's amazing. And I can't say that I've personally done that.
I've never done that.
But I mean, this is why you do hire. I always say, if you have someone else do the shopping for you, it is intentional, right? Because you're not going to pay for someone to do your shopping if you don't know exactly what you need. And a lot of us get like this shopping fatigue, right? But the reality is, okay, fine. Maybe you do need a new white t-shirt. I get it. Like, I don't even wear white because I wear white pants, but seriously, on top heavy, do a lot of spilling when I eat. Apparently coffee goes everywhere. But no, it really is one of those things that you don't necessarily need another black dress. You don't. You're like, no, but this one has the buttons. But this one has the buttons.
Linen.
And it's linen. You obviously need one of cotton. No, really and truly, we internalize that feeling. But it is very difficult to know how to implement that. And that brings me to, what's our challenge today, Sam? Let's talk about
let's talk about our challenge today.
For minimalism. So our challenge today, the intentional wardrobe movement, is challenging everyone here, including ourselves. This is our goal. We're going to try to let go of 5 to 10 items. And our hope really is by making baby steps.
Yeah, baby steps, little steps.
You can find the joy, and I used to tell my clients this all the time, find the joy of letting something go that once gave you joy and sharing it with others.
That's right. Someone else gets to enjoy it.
It's true. And you say, oh, but even that top that is new with tags that I've never worn, it used to give you joy. It gave you joy when you bought it. Like, you had true joy. It doesn't give you joy now. So pass it on.
Right.
Pass pass it on.
Pass the joy on. That's your way of passing on joy.
Yeah. So our challenge legitimately this month is try to let go of 5 to 10 items.
And so that's the baby steps. But sometimes when you get started with those baby steps, you start gaining momentum and you might find yourself, getting rid of a lot more things than that.
True. It's called the purge, y'all. It's called the purge.
And so I was going to share with you before we leave this 90-10 rule. So after we've talked about the challenge. So the idea is simple. Identify 10% of your possessions that bring you the most functional use, value, or sheer joy. And then prioritize the things that matter and find ways to minimize the rest. This might sound dramatic, but basically 90% of your belongings probably represent just stuff. And so that's why just getting rid of 5 to 10 probably is like a drop in the bucket. Unless you are a true minimalist and only have 5 to 10 items.
If you have 5 to 10 items,
then disregard what we said.
I would like to be you when I grow up. Now, I really and truly, that's an amazing accomplishment.
Yes.
If you have really
Kudos
gotten
to you.
there. But for the rest of us, it is a mountain that we're climbing. So we want to leave you with one final thought. You are not climbing that mountain alone.
Doing with us.
Yeah. You are always welcome to come along with us
That's
as
right.
we talk through these things and give you experience, give you our 2 cents on things. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Cheers to A Conscious Closet. Bye.
Bye.